Hey guys, welcome to Cinema Chats episode 3. We're going to continue our Halloween theme that we've been going on here. So, this is our third week. We only got one more left after this one. And this week, to bounce back from Rob Zombie's Halloween, which it was an interesting conversation, but the work for that video was very stressful as I didn't want to watch that movie or do research on it. So we decided this week we'd pick something that we both like quite a bit and that we've both seen several times and not kind of something we have to go back and revisit from 15 years ago. Um, Also, I just want to note we did get some things wrong in that video. We brought up certain things like Michael Myers' first kill. He's not wearing a mask. He is wearing a mask in the first
Yeah,
kill.
you told me that before we started recording. You're like, "Hey, you should bring up that Michael Myers isn't wearing a mask for the first kill. It'll make you sound smart." And I was getting set up, and I didn't know it.
Well, there was just other things too. There was like certain plot things we pointed out or things with the weapon, and I was like, "Oh, none of that actually is correct." But to be fair, I was drinking when I watched Halloween the second time.
Yeah, I was drinking pretty heavily.
Also, there was another thing I wish we'd have brought up about the stick thing is that in the Devil's Rejects, Bill Moseley does use a stick when he's torturing those two guys. So that's the thing. The scene where he's like, "I am the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work." He has a stick in that scene, which
Do you think maybe that's why he revisited this? He's like, "Well, people liked that. What was it? Maybe it was the stick."
he was like,
We'll go with that.
it wasn't the dialogue or anything or the tension of the Cedar Mosley's performance, it was the fucking stick. So yeah, we're talking about American Werewolf in London, which I've often said is either my second or third favorite film of all time. I always give like a flat answer on my favorite film of all time because there is no favorite for anything. It changes. But I always just say A Clockwork Orange is my favorite film because that was a movie that had a big impact on me and changed my life. It's not a movie I watch frequently. But if we're talking just purely entertainment, rewatchability when it comes to favorite films, my two favorite films are definitely this movie and Saturday Night Fever, by far. Those are the movies I've rewatched the most, and they're comfort movies. So let's just start this off with: do you remember the first time you saw the movie, and kind of what your history with this movie was over the years?
Yeah, so the first time I saw the movie, I had just blind bought it on DVD. I was a teenager. I'm pretty young. I think I was 13, maybe 14. And I had seen Ginger Snaps. I like that a lot. That was probably the first werewolf movie I saw that I remember. And then I had gotten The Howling with Child's Play and The Howling. It was a double feature DVD release, which was pretty cool. And I was like, okay, I like these two werewolf movies. I should probably watch the most famous one, other than The Wolf Man, which, that's anyhow. So I watched it late at night, sleep like just laying on my side, watching it on my crappy little bedroom I had as a teenager in my room, and it was just really funny and engaging, and I was very invested in the characters. It was not the movie I quite expected it to be. I don't know what I was thinking it was, but it was better than the movie in my head, which I don't think you can say very often.
I thought from what I had been told by people, like parents and stuff, that it was more of a horror movie. The comedy element had
Mhm.
been very undersold to me. I was just always told it was a very
Same.
scary movie. So when I watched it, I was surprised by how not scary. I mean, it has scary scenes. There's scenes that when I first saw it genuinely scared me. But I was surprised. I'm embarrassed to admit this. I saw American Werewolf in Paris before I saw London. Um, so that's my history with this. American Werewolf in Paris, I think, came out in 97, 98, and we rented
Mhm.
it. And I saw that movie and I fucking loved it. I thought it was great because I was like 8. There was titties in it. I was like, this is awesome. And I was watching it with people, and there was like somebody told me later, like, oh, this is like a remake or a sequel, and the original movie's really great. And I had no idea what American Werewolf in London like I had no context. I knew Thriller, but I didn't even know who like John Landis was. So there was a lot of pieces missing. I don't wanna say An American Werewolf in Paris was the first werewolf film I've ever seen, but it might have been. And I even think I saw Ginger Snaps before this or around the same time. I saw Ginger Snaps when I was, like, 12, and then this was on AMC one night because they used to play this all the time, and it was after I heard all the hype about it, and I really wasn't even that interested in it, to be honest. This was when I was starting to get into, like, art films and stuff, so I was losing interest in, like, genre stuff. And then it was on TV that one night, and I watched it, and I, like, was blown away. I was like, "Oh my god, this is, like" it's a weird thing to say about this movie, but I think it's true, and what's kind of the great thing about it, it's a very comfortable movie. The tone of the film and the directing and sort of how it brings you in, I find it to be a very relaxing it makes me feel good when I watch this movie, which is odd to say for a horror comedy about a werewolf. From the early '80s, but even right away, immediately when it starts, there's something about this movie aesthetically and sonically, that just kinda connects with me, and even my girlfriend, she watched it for the first time a few years ago, and she was like, "Man, that's a really, like, easy, comfortable movie to watch," and we've watched it a few times now, so that's always what stuck with me about it over the years besides, like, the things we'll get into about the movie. The I don't even know how it's so enjoyable or what works about it. It's kind of a secret I've been trying to figure out. It might have just been Landis at that time with Rick Baker, with the actors and everything. Because even Thriller has that element to it. Thriller's very rewatchable, and it's a lot of the same aesthetic. So I don't know if it's just a thing that happened then, and it's kinda lightning in a bottle that we'll never get again, but do you get what I'm saying about that, though? Like, the tone? Like, there's something about this movie that's, I don't know, it's very easy to watch. Like, you don't
No.
get
No, I know what you mean. I have a theory on. I have a few theories. I think
Okay.
the first is that it takes Landis's comedy background, which is very comforting and fun. It mixes it with the horror aesthetic and genre tropes. On top of just the characters being so lovable, I think that even the side characters, even like the little boy that always says no to the nurse, I think just little details like that, or the one actor in the doctor with the funny voice, Mr. Kessler, and dropping the bedpans. It's got a lot of comedy in it. The soundtrack adds a ton. I think about it a lot. It might be my favorite soundtrack of all time. We talked about that in Rob Zombie's Halloween a lot. How he just threw in like Goodbye Horses, Don't Fear the Reaper like three times, and this is a good example of a soundtrack where you are using music that complements the film. Uh, I think that's a huge part of it, and I think us both loving horror movies is a big part of it.
Well, I would say this about it, about us and our relationship in this movie. I think it's because it's a horror comedy that it taps into our sensibilities because it's like neither one
Yeah,
of us can take ourselves seriously enough to do true horror. You know what I mean? But we also couldn't do
yeah,
conventional comedy. And I think we see a lot of relatability in the Jack and David characters and kind of that dynamic. Even though we see very little
yeah.
of it, I think for certain people that resonates
Well,
more
that's
than
the immediate
anything.
hook.
Yes.
It's almost a Bill and Ted type classic dynamic, but you're only given a little bit of it. I forgot my actual theory on the movie. It's that it takes an American cinema and takes it to a foreign location. Like one of my favorite shows, which is I guess considered a sequel to this, which is weird as fuck to me, is She Wolf of London, which is just the same concept with it's American and then London producers coming together to make a show. So it's like the best of both worlds somehow, and it's very pleasant and it's just comfort food. That's why I watch it. Just like this movie, it's very much the same appeal. And I do think that weird mix of familiar and foreign is a huge factor with the cinematography, the location, the moors, getting into the slaughtered lamb pub.
Yeah, it does feel like that's a great point. I think that's very astute. It does feel like you do go to this like movies are, you hope they take you somewhere. That's the idea. You want to go on a journey, we go to a
Yeah,
place. As an American, you do feel this like you don't belong here when they're in Europe, when they're walking around the moors and stuff like that. There is this feeling of like Lost in Translation I always thought did that really well. but
Mhm.
like he's in Japan and he has this disconnect with Japanese culture and the language and stuff like that, and you feel like the Bill Murray character.
It'd be so funny if that movie's made today. It gets 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, an old white guy goes to Japan and doesn't fit in with the culture.
I would love it if he turned into a werewolf. An American Werewolf in Tokyo. Like him and Scarlett Johansson, it's a werewolf story. Okay, so we're basically this episode we're gonna try to not jump around as much as we did before, and we're gonna like go like scene by scene and through the movie because we've both seen this movie so many times. Um, so I want to talk about this. The thing you just said, this is what I always said about the movie after seeing it a bunch of times. I think this movie starts as two guys that are in like Animal House. They're in like a National Lampoon comedy, like, European college vacation. And then they
Mhm.
accidentally walk into like a Hammer horror movie. And that's what the Slaughtered Lamb transition is. Like at the beginning, it feels like a comedy movie. These are two
Yeah,
comedic characters. Then they walk into a horror movie, which I think is intentional. Like they go in there and the transition from that scene goes from comedic to serious. And then when they're out in the
yeah.
moors, we're now in a horror movie. And then from that point, the movie's kind of jumping back and forth between those two things. But it also kind of reminds me of that Twilight Zone opening that John Landis did with Albert Brooks and Dan Aykroyd. I think it's very
Yeah.
similar, where there's just two guys kind of riffing and it's funny, and then out of nowhere it turns into a horror thing. And he was just very good at that. He only did it these few times.
Well,
That
that's what makes
sensibility.
the opening of the movie so effective once you get to the hook of the initial werewolf attack, is that it functions so well as a buddy comedy. When they first get off the back of the truck with all the sheep, their banter is actually really quotable and funny. I always love the line, "You're talking about the girl I love, I'm talking about the girl you wanna fuck." And there's just tons of little lines and moments, them asking at the pentang or was it the Pentagon, I think they call it, on
Yeah.
the wall of the slaughtered lamb, the whole bit there with "Remember the Alamo." There's so much that you almost forget you're watching a horror movie. So when the werewolf comes in, and when it does, is maybe the most animalistic werewolf in a movie. Um, I think I typically like bipedal werewolves, but actually dropping it down to all fours is very effective in this. And the snarling noises and the gore from when it eats someone, it just seems so particularly vicious because you were kind of lulled into the sense of comfort of it being a comedy movie for like 15 minutes.
Well, I think that's what shocked me the first time I saw it too. Was just like I didn't expect Jack to die in like the first 10 minutes. I still
No.
think that's like shocking.
I
Okay,
didn't know which of them was even going to be the werewolf when I first saw it.
yeah, I didn't
So for all
either.
I knew, Griffin Dune could have been the star of the movie until he wasn't.
So okay, so I have a few questions because we'll go into the slaughtered lamb, and I want to talk about the slaughtered lamb. First, what the fuck were David and Jack doing? They're in this thing with sheep, and then they're just in some town, some village they don't know. Like, what was their plan for the day? Where were they gonna stay for the night? Like,
I
you
always just took it as like that typical like Kerouac-esque backpacking, or maybe they had some kind of like trail they were going on that was a roundabout way. So they get this like maybe they wanted to see the Moors, but it was an inopportune time to go there.
Well, I'm just thinking about the timing of their trip. Like, they're walking, and they know it's gonna be night soon. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're just stupid. It's just because it's one of those things you don't think about. It's a movie logic thing. So, like, when you're watching the movie, you just go with it, but I actually stopped and thought
Mhm.
about it, and maybe it's coming from the perspective of having, like, a phone and all that stuff nowadays, and this was, the '80s,
Yeah.
so maybe back then you did just meander and get lost all the time. I can accept that. So they're joking around, and then they both walk into the Slaughtered Lamb, best movie bar of all time. If we could open a bar together, a theme bar in any city, I would definitely open the Slaughtered Lamb.
Yeah.
Pentagram on the wall and all. Okay, so a few things with this sequence. What the fuck is going on at this place? Who are these people?
I love they all feel like pod people, like from Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
They don't feel like
Which is
real
great because like
people.
when you go to another country, that's probably how it feels interacting with the locals.
So they sit down and they're cold. It's like freezing outside is what's established, and they're wearing the, the red and the green, the iconic jackets.
Yeah.
And they're sitting in there, and people are in there just bantering, and they have the whole thing about like, do you have any food? And she's like, we don't have any food. And then he's like, do you have any tea? And she's like, I can make you tea. And everybody's just staring at them, like judging them, and then goes back to their banter.
Yeah.
And then some guy starts telling some weird joke about the Alamo. I still have no idea.
It's got one perfect shot of the guy spitting his beer,
Yeah.
and it makes me laugh every single time.
Well, so I guess these are the things that you want to discuss, right? So let's really break it down instead of like going in like how aware do you think everyone in the bar is of the werewolf interactions in the town? How many werewolves have existed? Has there always been a werewolf, or is there just the one guy who was transformed into a werewolf? They're all aware of this, and like, you know what I mean? Like it's never it's one of the things I
Yeah,
like. There's ambiguity, but
I agree.
what
I
is
always took
what's
it.
going on with these townsfolk, these Alamo people, and their werewolf
Yeah,
problem?
I always figured the townsfolk were like aware of the werewolf generationally. Like there had been a few, and it was like passed down like a folklore kind of thing, and a more traditional like movie would be like, oh, there's always been a werewolf or two around here, and we've been living on the land our whole lives, and our parents and our grandparents, and they just have learned not to intervene with it. They just get drunk instead.
Yeah, that's the thing. Does everyone just go hang out at the slaughtered lamb on a full moon? And it's like, all right, we all got to go get
Yeah.
pissed drunk so we don't get attacked by a fucking werewolf, And it's like, oh shit, 2 Americans. All right, you guys go out. Because the thing is, it's interesting. It's a scene. It's one of the laugh out loud scenes for me. Is when Griffin Dunne's like, "Hey, what's that star on the wall?" And
Yeah.
then they kick them out and send them out essentially to their deaths. Uh,
Real quick, we have to bring up the oh shit, what's it called? The fucking dartboard.
yeah.
When he asked that, the one guy, he's throwing darts the whole scene. He's like, I've never missed that dartboard in my
Oh
life.
yeah. I've never missed that dartboard in my life until today. He's like fucking pissed about it.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I forgot about that scene.
It
Yeah.
tarnished his reputation as a dart player in this bar.
No, there's some like asshole stiff lip like Brits in this, like the guy who gets attacked at the train station later on and stuff like that. Or
Oh yeah.
there's like characters in this where it's like, man, you
I
guys
think
are
that's what I like about the movie. It's an American going to this foreign place and just killing them.
it's about American interventionalism.
Yeah. It's just a metaphor for ugly Americans.
So I have another thing. Why don't Jack and I'm just saying this, two college guys, right? Like let's say you and I go to
Mhm.
the slaughtered lamb. We're Jack and David. I'd get a
Yeah.
beer,
Yeah.
right? You would think. Like, because even if they weren't 21, it didn't matter. It's in Europe, it wouldn't be law. So why don't they go to the bar and get 2 beers? Because you're in whiskey, even if you're trying to get warm, you think they'd be like, well, hey, let's just get
Yeah.
drunk with these locals, and then party at the
I
slaughter lab. And I think if they had done this, they probably would have avoided a werewolf attack
that might be why they didn't do it.
because Landis couldn't figure out. Well, because to me, maybe
Yeah.
the way to do it, there's 2 ways to write this, right? So there's the way he does it, which I think is questionable. And then the other way is they both get really drunk and then they
Then they
wander
leave.
out to the
Yeah.
moors. And then the people are like, shit, they're out there. And then that's when they all go out with the guns. That to me logically is what you would do in a screenwriting. But he did write this when he was 19 and he did no revisions to the script. So I'm thinking that might be what
I would
happened.
say also them not drinking and staying there long adds to the tension of the scene between them and the tenants of the slaughtered lamb. And them drinking would just be one more thing to add to this already very busy scene of them asking for the beer, ordering it, getting the beers, drinking it, abandoning it when they leave, or finishing the beers. It's just one more obstacle to complete this scene.
Yeah, I think maybe it might have been a victim of like editing too at the time. Like, now you could cut that. Like the
Yeah,
beer would set down, he would take a swig, and then the camera could cut to. And I just think back then you probably had to construct the scene in itself, and you couldn't think about we can show the passing of time very easily.
Yeah,
like an
exactly.
Edgar Wright montage, like The World's
Yeah.
End. You could do that now, but in like 1980 when they shot this, that probably was a lot more difficult. Um, it just occurred to me though, right? Like, does they would get drunk and go out, or it's just a
Yeah,
weird.
no, it makes sense.
It's just a weird scene to me that they go there. All of a sudden, everybody there is really tense about it. They just ask for some tea, and then it seems like
I guess he's warm.
everybody's chilling, right? And then as soon as he brings up the star, everybody's like, "Nah, fuck this." Also, why do they have the star on the wall? Is that to
I
keep
was
the
gonna say,
werewolf out from the slaughtered lamb?
I guess so. That's, that other witches
Yeah, do they worship
go out their
Satan?
way.
Well, that's part of the ambiguity. Is the werewolf a generational thing that's been passed down, or is this place in
Well, even,
particular?
is this slaughtered lamb kind of bringing people to the werewolf?
Oh, I like that.
And the
Okay.
one guy who has the guilt about it and everything, it's kinda like The Howling, how they have that community, and they lure people in through the doctor.
So the werewolf won't eat them, they have to feed the werewolf.
Exactly.
And that even the title of the bar too, it being the slaughtered lamb, you come there, you become one of the slaughtered lamb, maybe. A little bit of the
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think that's interesting. So it's just a bunch of psychopaths who try to trap American tourists and feed them to their local werewolf.
I think it's possible. I'm not gonna say that's the intention, but
Oh, John Landis, we're not gonna get a John Landis interview. We might be able to get a Max Landis interview, but John
yeah, he
Land
won't stop emailing me about it.
Oh god, he's like making YouTube videos now again. They get like 1,000 views and he's still talking like he's somebody, like he wasn't canceled and like nobody cares. And I'm like, Max, bro.
It's
But
just I didn't even care he was canceled, like, I don't know what he was accused he was just so far off my radar at that point. It's
uh
like, "Oh, people are mad at Max Landis, okay."
well, yeah, that's the thing was like it was the least shocking cancellation of them all. Like, wow, a Landis
Yeah.
did something bad. I'm gonna try as much as I can to get through this cast without bringing up the Twilight Zone incident. I'm
Yeah.
gonna try so hard. So, the next scene is when they got to the moors, and the werewolf attacks. So they start hearing helicopter sounds in the distance, and they start running away. And then a helicopter comes down and cuts off Jack's head.
It's
Uh,
horrible.
yeah, it's a terrifying scene. Some
Do you
reason,
know in Twilight Zone, they were gonna wrap up for the night, and John said, "Hold on, we just have one more scene, all we have to do is land this helicopter." I'm sorry.
that's great. Oh my god. Yeah, by the way, just to throw it out there, John Landis killed 2, children and Vic Morrow, the actor. Just thought I'd throw
Yeah.
that out there. I
Rip.
I I would say some people defend him, but he seems to be the only one. It seems like everyone else is pretty much like, "No, I'm pretty sure you killed those people."
Yeah.
It seems like because he tries to explain it like, "We don't know what happened." It's like, "No, you went over the
I saw
hours."
it.
Yeah, there's video and you pretty much broke every security rule and law that there was at the time to prevent things like this. So I'm gonna put the blame on you.
I mean,
Um,
I'll throw an allegedly out there in case he's litigious.
that's true. Yes, John Landis allegedly brutally murdered killed 2 children and Vic Morrow. He did have a funny thing though. I heard he went to Vic Morrow's funeral and the line was like, "Well, Vic Morrow died for a great movie." Okay, so they're walking on the moors and they're singing and shit. They're having a good old jolly time. They're all happy. Two American
Yeah.
guys, and then
They seem drunk in the scene even, to be honest. Like, how they're singing together and all that.
yeah, no,
Going back to what you were saying.
yeah, they're drunk on the tea, the slaughtered lamb
Very
tea.
strong tea.
For some reason, I'm
That
getting
could be
like,
an interesting thing too if they were drugged at the slaughter lamb with the tea or something. I like if there's a modern remake, I could see that happening.
Chad here. Hope you're enjoying the show. I know I am. We'll be right back in a second. First, I know we're having on a laugh tonight, but some things you gotta take very seriously. One such thing, sober October. I'm not talking about drinking beer. I have a problem that I haven't been quite public about. I am addicted to Chipotle. Eventually, I was doing things I'm not proud of in order just to get guac. I've had Chad as my sponsor. But for the month of Sober October, I'm asking you, please, do not eat at Chipotle. Instead, send the money you would spend at Chipotle to our YouTube channel. I saw this motherfucker eating his Chipotle, shoveling his mouth like a goddamn pig. I threw it to the ground. I said, what are you doing eating that trash? He said, I'm at Chipotle. I said, not anymore. This is my house. That's right. I'm taking a piss right now. Fuck Chipotle, and fuck you if you eat it. Chipotle, more like shit-hole-lay.
So they're walking through the moors, and then they hear noises, and they don't know what it is. They think it's like a dog or a coyote or something like that, and they start running back and forth. So I don't know. There's kind of a weird balance between this. I do think this is a scary sequence, but their reaction to it is funny at the same time. So tonally, I think this is when kind of
Yeah.
the hybrid starts happening with the movie. Also visually, I just think this is one of the best sequences. This might be one of my best
Yeah.
night photography sequences.
I think it's the best the Moors have looked when you think about like the Hound of Baskervilles and all that. It's the best interpretation of that I've seen, even though I know it's not a direct one. It's clearly an homage.
Yeah, from what I've read about the scene too, like and what they talked about on the commentary, was that it was like freezing that night.
Hmm.
And apparently when it would rain on them, when it would hit their head, it would just go to ice. So they had to keep wrapping
Yeah.
themselves up in blankets over and over again. Okay, so basically they keep running around back and forth, and then Jack falls. And there's a moment here that's very thriller, like when Michael puts the arm out and he's like, "Hey, I'll take you home," with David. He's like, "You big goof," or whatever. And then
Hmm.
Jack is the one. And then the werewolf just fucking comes out of nowhere.
Well, that's what's great is that it's usually you trip and then you get killed, but in this movie, his life is saved by tripping,
That
and it
is
sets you up
true.
as a viewer. We're like, oh, he fell. He's the one in danger because he's the one that fell. He needs helped up, but it's actually the person still standing that is in harm's way.
So then the werewolf just starts killing the shit out of Jack. He's just like eating him, and Griffin Dunn's just screaming. And apparently, I guess Rick Baker was just holding the werewolf head, that was like a puppet, and he was just beating up Griffin Dunn during the sequence.
Yeah, you can kind of see it in the jacket and how it, like dips down.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't want to like go crazy on the microphone, but it is like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Holy shit, he's
That's
fucking.
it's a really visceral scene.
No, it's fucking crazy. I mean, it really is. It's
Yeah,
insane. Like it's funny because there's a lot of subtlety to it that you don't think about. It's really just but what I think a lot of modern horror movies get wrong, and my issue with a lot of them is I think the actors don't deliver the scares. Like Justin Long, I haven't seen
yeah,
Barbarian, but he's in it, and I'm like, that guy, like Jeepers Creepers, half of what makes that movie work is Justin Long when there isn't the creeper around. Because
yeah.
he's
Well, the thing is, a lot of actors aren't willing to go the distance, but with Justin, he's going to go long.
Justin
That's what they
Short.
say in the industry.
Uh, but well, that's the thing though. Like, so Griffin Dunn, like, I don't know how visceral this is actually, like, special effects wise, but his screaming and body movements is what makes it feel real. That's what makes you buy into it.
I was listening to Rick Baker talk about the movie, and it's funny because it has a Jaws quality with the werewolf, where they had to keep shooting it from certain angles because if you saw the back of it, you'd see people legs sticking out of the werewolf's ass. So they had to keep like just the head for a bit. Or the best one is the scene of the guy. He goes up the escalator later on in the movie, and you see the werewolf slowly, which is insane. It looks like a real werewolf,
No, that is like the
but
10
they
out of
cut it
10. Uh,
just in time.
so he's just getting ripped. There's this nice moment here where David's running and then he stops and says, Jack. And he turns around and goes back.
Yeah,
I think this is really a crucial moment. It's a small moment, but the fact he's caught up in the panic and fear of it, and then he's leaving, and then he does the bro thing. He's like, "Oh shit,
Yeah,
my buddy's back there," and he goes back. It's just that little moment of humanity. Um, Also adds
it,
to it as a scene as well, because I do think a lot of people would take off running, but I also do think a lot of people would go back.
exactly. Well, it's just a little moment that it humanizes. Uh, what the hell's his first name?
David,
Kessler.
David.
David. That's right. Yeah, it humanizes David so much because getting that moment of weakness, but then coming to his senses and still doing the moral thing.
Well, it's also I think it's I don't want to say a moment of bravery, but it is like
Yeah.
it says a lot about that character without 'cause that's the thing covering these first like 15, 20 minutes. The characters get so well defined and the friendship gets so well defined so immediately that the rest of the
Hmm.
movie can kind of lean on it. Cuz I would say if there's a highlight of this movie characterization wise, it is not the romance even though I like that, and it's not the supporting
Yeah.
characters. It is the relationship between Jack and David. And even when
Well, I do
Jack
want to
comes
talk about the
back,
romance at some
oh,
point,
well, we get to
in
that.
contrast with this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, hottest nurse in movie history.
Yeah, Jenny, I got her. The
Uh,
mom and Child's Play too.
so then he gets attacked by the werewolf, and then there's the scene with the naked guy, and he looks over after they shoot him, and he
Hmm.
just kind of starts and passes out and stuff like that. And then we go into the hospital stretch of the movie, which is basically it's a series of there's like a nightmare, and then it'll cut back to David in the hospital, him kind of psychologically dealing with the fact that he saw his friend get murdered, not knowing what was real or not, and then slowly this nurse kind of developing a crush on him. I don't really know why. We could talk about that later. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. This is one of those things. John Landis wrote this when he was on Kelly's Heroes when he was like 19 or 20, and like I said, a lot of this movie to me screams first draft. I don't
A lot
think.
of it's very teenager, where it's like I go to the hospital and the hot nurse wants me, and
Yeah, they're talking about circumcision, and it's just a conversation, and then yeah, that whole part there,
her feeding him.
yeah, the little bit, I forget he smiles. I want to talk about David Naughton for a second before we get into this stretch because this is kind of when it stops being a buddy movie and he does become the focus of the movie. So
Yeah.
David Naughton famously was the Dr. Pepper guy. I'm a pepper, you're a pepper. And then he was on the show Making It, and that show got canceled, but he did the song Making It, which was in Meatballs and did become a big hit, which was a disco track in the late 70s. So he had a bit of a career here, and Landis
Mhm.
cast him in this movie because of the Dr. Pepper commercials, which he was fired from because of this movie because he was naked in this. And I think Scott Baio then, Charles in Charge, got the role. So after this movie, David Naughton, he's on a couple sitcoms, like My Sister Sam. I sound like a historian of David Naughton,
Yeah.
but he's on a couple sitcoms, and then he shows up in some movies. I think it's one's called Hot Dog the movie, which is like a ski sex comedy. It's basically like Hot Tub Time Machine.
Oh, no, I'm actually familiar with that one. That's funny.
Yeah, Hot Dog. You're like
It took a moment.
you're like Dr. Pepper. I don't know what that is, but
Well, I thought I remember seeing it at the Blockbuster. I'm like, oh, they've adapted a hot dog into a movie. This I gotta see.
yeah, it's one of those movies that was on cable a lot, like in the 80s and
Yeah.
90s. I saw it as a kid like that. I remember it's not very good from what I remember. It's just like
No.
sex comedy. But then he really doesn't have much of a career. It's hard to say with this. I think he's really good in this movie, and for years, I've just been bothered by the fact that David Naughton really didn't turn into a movie star or anything like this. I mean, you watch this movie.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's a great actor. I don't think he is, but he can carry a movie. The way he looks and acts on camera is very good, and especially on
Yeah.
comedy. And I think Griffin Dunn is definitely the better actor, without question, between the two of them. But I also don't think this would work as well. I think him being the lead, kind of the almost more generic sort of handsome character. I like his voice a lot too. I know it's a weird thing to point out, but I like David Naughton's
Hmm.
voice, and I think that's a big I'm still hungry. and all that stuff like that. So what do you think about David Naughton in this? And just like it's a weird thing to think about somebody only being famous really for like one movie like this.
Yeah, I know I saw him like some straight to video movies back in the day in high school, but it was like very low to no budget type. So I think one was called Brutal Massacre, though it was like a mockumentary kind of this is Spinal Tap of making an indie movie. But he's a different person in it. He's like 30 years older or something. He doesn't look the same at all. In this movie, I think it really, especially in retrospect, because a lot of people like it's kind of a known trivia thing that he's from the Dr. Pepper commercials, but people don't think of that when they're watching the movie today. If people even watch the movie today, I've talked to a number of people that have never seen it in the past few years, which is really shocking to me. But I think it kind of preserves him in this way where the role feels more authentic or special because this is his moment to shine. And I think it kind of I'm trying to think of it just I don't know, it just keeps it more pure, I guess, is the word that I'm
So
trying to
you're
avoid
saying you
using.
think it's because I like your point you're making that he's the movie and him probably benefit from the fact that he's not more famous. Because I'd say the Dr.
Yeah.
Pepper commercial's socially irrelevant. I know
Yeah,
it's a
nowadays.
yeah, I don't think anybody. I think we know what it is because we're like nerdy about that stuff. But
Yeah,
that
you, like,
was
look it up on YouTube, like Dr. Pepper, David Naughton commercial kinda shit.
yeah. I don't even think that's a thing. Like people
Well,
know
even the
about
cast
it.
of Friends, who are more relevant today probably. What was it? Was it Joey was in some of those commercials for Coke or whatever?
Yeah,
And, like, that's a funny thing, but not everybody who watches Friends is thinking that.
but yeah, I like what you said there. I do agree. I think, and the fact the character's name is David. I see David Naughton as David Kessler. I don't.
Oh, that's true. I
I
was thinking the Jewish connection with David, like the Star of David, because so much of this movie is about being a young Jewish man, struggling with becoming a man.
I agree. I think it was just coincidental his name was David because David Naughton, I believe, isn't Jewish and he wasn't circumcised. That's why he can't be shown
Oh,
full frontal in the werewolf transformation, is because he's supposed to be Jewish and he isn't circumcised.
that's
Um,
interesting. I didn't know about the main actor's circumcision, but
I went real deep on my
that is funny
research.
that he's not actually Jewish. I always thought he was. I just bought it.
I think Griffin Dunn is Jewish. He might not even be Jewish. I don't know. I think he's Jewish, but I think I'm just thinking
But
that
what
because
is
of
that
stereotype.
called? Like, if there's blackface, what is it when an actor, a non-Jewish actor, plays an actor? What's that called?
The Jew face, I guess. I don't know. It was a Woody Allen. I mean, most Woody Allen movies, Owen Wilson isn't Jewish, but
Yeah, I feel like they get a pass though.
they still play it like a neurotic Jew every time.
Oh, I guess yeah. John Landis, you see that through the eyes of a Jew, so
I never occurred to
the
me. I
director gives him
thought
a
David
pass.
Naughton was. I thought they were Jewish.
Yeah, he's probably Italian.
Yeah,
There's a
he.
lot of like back then Jews playing Italians like Fonzie, so I'd imagine the
Oh,
opposite works as well, where an Italian can play a Jew.
well, De Niro. De Niro did that a lot.
Yes,
He would switch between Italian, Jewish, Irish all the time, and it was like, what are you? I thought you were.
and
I thought you
then
were.
he's in The Irishman, and he's playing some young kid everybody's talking about.
Yeah, they keep calling him kid, and he looks like he's fucking on it.
50.
Yeah,
This kid you've been talking
I
about,
love
he's got grandpa
I
arms.
love Scorsese, but like, fuck, dude. Um, so I mean, the hospital setting. This is kind of like the breather moment for the movie. We kind of get to slow down a little bit here. We get introduced to the doctor. We get introduced to the
Yeah.
nurse.
This is
Um,
where the British comedy influence really kicks in. Like, I get Monty Python vibes from the
yeah,
doctor interactions a lot.
yeah, I agree. He also slowly, as the movie goes on, becomes more of like a detective or like a universal
Yeah.
horror character. He's like trying to solve the mystery and all that stuff,
He
which I
he's
think's
a
interesting because he should be a skeptic, but he actually pursues.
Yeah, well, I think what it's setting up the whole time, because it feels like it goes nowhere, which I think is intentional, but it's all setting up the abruptness of the ending. Or you see him get this character arc and think, oh, he's going to be the guy that saves the day in the final moment. And he's going to come and save Jenny Agutter from the werewolf, or he's going to save David in some way. But instead, he just shows up to witness David get killed, and he's just helpless.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I thought he was gonna show up with like a gun with the silver bullet, or something,
Right.
and gonna say, yeah, exactly. Like that's how I thought the movie. Well, because the first time you see this movie, you're just going with it, the energy of it, and it's so exciting scene to scene. And
Yeah.
I don't want to jump the gun on the ending, but yeah, the eruptness of it was the most shocking thing to me the first time I saw it. I legitimately like
Yeah.
the way people talk about The Sopranos and stuff. That was the impact of this on me. The things to talk about here, though, to keep the theme going of the Jewishness element here with John Landis, and I think thematically this is definitely his most rich film out of anything that he made. I don't think it's like I think all of his films are a little loose and sloppy. I don't think this is an exception. I think Animal
Mhm.
House and Blues Brothers and Trading Places all have.
But it's such a charm of especially the early movies, is it has this feeling of hanging out or, like, moments captured on film rather than a strict narrative you have to follow.
Well, I always thought that him and Spielberg were very analogous to each other. I always thought Blues Brothers felt like a
Mhm.
Spielberg movie, and so this movie I don't think feels that way. I do think this movie is really the thing that makes him stand out stylistically from a lot of directors at the time. Uh, in particular with
Yeah.
like his contemporaries, and I think in many ways people haven't topped what he did in this movie, as much as how I feel about John Landis as a person. So we get the nightmare scenes in this. Now, some of them are representing, I think, his animalistic nature that's coming in, but there's clearly a thread through this about Jews immigrating to America or their disconnect with Europe post World War II. That's clearly a big theme in
Yeah.
this, and being even seen as monsters or freaks and others. And the Nazi werewolf, the Nazi
It's
monster attack.
obvious.
That's when it's its most.
Zombies.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that would be my favorite sequence, but I think there's one scene in this movie, but I'll wait till we get to it, that I think is the best scene of the movie and best sells the premise of the movie and kind of the ambition of this film. Because what still blows me away all these years about this movie every time I watch it, besides its enjoyability, for a fact, a 20-year-old wrote this. This is an incredibly ambitious, like narratively and thematically, even though it doesn't feel that way. But would you actually think about the concepts of it, like the dead
Yeah.
friend coming back and slowly becoming more disfigured as the story goes, and talking to him comedically, even though he looks grotesque. But then they take that to a place where it gets really macabre and really funny and really dark. So what do you take from the dream sequences? What stands out to you? And how do you think they kind of work in the construction of the film itself?
Yeah, it's the dreams are a really funny thing. I watched this movie pretty recently with my sister and my mom for the first time. They'd never seen it, and it was a weird experience because I figured everybody just loved this movie, and I don't think my sister was interested at all. She's younger, and my mom, I don't know if she liked it or not. She kept skipping through the porno sequences, which I think hurts the overall quality. I mean, I do think they're important contextually, so to skip it, I get why she did, because it's awkward, but she don't I know she didn't like the ending, but anyhow, when I was watching it, the dream sequence seemed really they're just thrown in there. It's funny because it makes sense because in the hospital, you need to throw some scares in to remind the audience it's a horror movie, and that's how it feels. But each one does deepen the themes of the movie, like him running through the woods and then eating the I don't remember, I think it was a deer, but I
It's
could
a
be
deer.
mistaken.
It's a deer.
Okay, I was trying to think deer or antelope, but I thought it was a deer, which has one of my favorite shots ever of when he skips over the log. It's just such a dainty little hop. I remember one time I was staying up with friends in high school, and sometimes we just do A B repeat on the DVD player at a funny moment, and just play that like all night while we just talked. And it was just that, just him hopping over the log for like 3 hours. We just talked about whatever, and yeah, I think each one is visually interesting. They're each unique little vignettes. Of course, the Nazi zombie sequence is the most memorable because it's absolutely outrageous. That was the first scene I'd ever seen from the movie, ironically. And I remember it's like, what is that movie with those weird Nazi zombie things killing that family? Like, I thought that was a whole movie. And it was on it was that I believe it was that horror clip show movie with Donald Pleasance in the movie theater. Forget what it's called, but it's a pretty famous one. It got a Blu-ray release a few years ago, so I'd seen that clip out of context, and I had no idea what it was from. And I was like, "What is that movie?" So watching this movie, he's in the hospital, and all of a sudden, that you get to that scene, it's like, "Oh, this is what that's from. That's insane. I never would have guessed that." But then you get the dream within a dream, with the zombie hiding behind the curtain, and that's a great fake out.
Well, that's where the comedy balances with the horror, like subject matter wise. Like, you got to think that scene's pretty messed up. Like, they shoot kids. I mean, they cut
Yeah, but
away
it's
from
done in such a way that's so over the top that
they
it's
s-
not disturbing.
they slit his throat, and then even
Mhm.
even the zombie coming out of the curtain and stabbing her. It's like there's the part where it's like it's almost Argento esque. Like, it makes me think of
Yeah,
Suspiria, where the girl keeps getting stabbed in the heart 37 times, and the zombie's just stabbing her, and she's this beautiful,
and
you
he's
know,
just shrieking.
yeah, just
It's like this ridiculous pterodactyl.
and then the wake up, holy shit.
Well, I
Uh,
think too, it's so self-aware to do a dream within a dream like that because it's almost commenting on the movie itself, where it's like, "Oh, it's a dream. This is getting tedious." But what if it's another dream right after the dream? It's kind of poking fun at itself in that way
mhm.
with the audience.
So we get the scene in this stretch where Jack shows back up with the makeup and talks to him a little bit briefly. Um, I believe this is when he tells him he looks like a meatloaf, or that might be later at the apartment.
I think it's the second time he sees Jack right
Yeah.
before he turns.
So we don't get
Yeah,
much
I think
time
so.
here. It's like it's the makeup's really just like scratches and stuff like that. And
Yeah, it's funny. They just kind of catch up with each other.
yeah, this isn't the scene because I think the scene later is the one where it's like, okay, wow, this is awesome, and this one's more like
Mhm.
just kind of setting up to you. Because even at this point, you might think maybe this is another dream or David's just seeing this and this isn't real. You could
Yeah, and
interpret it that way.
what's nice too is it humanizes Jack as a ghost, where he's just selfishly talking about his own life and problems. And he has that line, "Life mocks me even in death." And that is how someone would react if they died. That'd be the first thing they'd want to talk about is their funeral. Then he's like, "Oh, by the way, you have to
Yeah, that's
you have to kill
right.
yourself."
That is a great way to put it. Well, I always love. I think it's so funny where it's like, oh god, she fucked this guy. Like that's what he cares about. This chick that he had a crush on.
Exactly.
Because that's exactly that'd be accurate. If I died now, that'd be the first. If I came to visit you a ghost, I'd
Yeah.
be like, God, are you big chilling me, you motherfucker? Hanging out with my girl. Yeah, I love that. That is great because he should come thematically be like, it should be Marley and Christmas Carol. Like
Oh yeah.
David, the werewolf curse, and all that. And he comes and he's like, God damn it.
Well, it's just very comic books, in my
I
opinion.
agree. The comic
The
book,
same
yeah.
way you can tell, like, Stephen King grew up on EC Comics and all that, or Clive Barker. I get that same vibe from this, like, the idea of having someone gradually decompose, and they're saying this irreverent, kind of silly dialogue. To me, it's all very comic books.
I agree. Yeah, I think the only thing comparable in the time when you see is definitely Creep Show has some of those elements,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of that here. So then Alex the nurse, after knowing David for I think 2 days, 2 or 3 days, she tells the doctor like I'm gonna take him to my place to
Yeah.
relax. And that's all fine. Okay, it's weird, but this was the '80s, so I'm like,
It's a
okay.
different culture, too. This is a different country that we're commenting
Well,
on.
I want to go to this country if this is how it
Yeah.
is. I don't think it's this way, but if it is, I'm going. I'm going there right now. Um, well, that doesn't bother me. It's not her bringing him over because it's not just the eruptness of the movie. The pacing of it is very bizarre, and storytelling pacing especially.
Mhm.
Like things happening in the movie, it goes some things they spend some time on, and other things that you think like, well, shouldn't you have some character development for this whole thing? And they just jump into it. She takes him back to the place, and she basically just tells him, I've had 7 guys or something I've slept with in my life. I don't know why she shared that information. She's like, I find you
Yeah.
very attractive. And she says all that awkwardly. Don't get me wrong, it's
Yeah.
adorable, but it's almost like a
I've
hen-
had
It's almost like
I've had a girl do that to me before,
it's
where
almost
it
like
was
a
like,
hentai or something though that she just throws it out there. Like it's this almost male
yeah,
fantasy of like, I find you attractive. I want to let you know this beautiful woman has no confidence in herself whatsoever. She can't talk to
once
this
again, it's written by a
college.
teenage boy
Yeah.
who's like, oh, she's probably so nervous to talk to me that because I do definitely think John Landis self-inserts with David.
No question, he is David. I would even say
Yeah,
Max Landis. I saw him in an interview once because he was going to remake this for a while before he was
I
canceled.
remember
He
that.
was going to do Hipster American Werewolf in London. And he talked about how he saw himself the most in this movie. And I get what he's talking about, like just him talking his
Mhm.
sensibilities. If there was any movie of John Landis's that Max Landis like would try to write or do something with the genre hybrid, it would be American Werewolf in London. This is the closest thing to Chronicle, in
Yeah.
that sense.
Well, going back to David and the structure of the movie, he doesn't have much of a motivation really. He has a love story with Alex. I guess that's kind of part of it, but then he has this problem of being a werewolf, but he's not really looking for a solution. He's almost just trying to figure out if he's crazy or not as he slowly succumbs to lycanthropy. But he's not really motivated in doing what he's doing. He's just kind of hanging out in her apartment.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of like, well, that's the thing I think about the script. I wonder how much he had the script fleshed out because
It's actually very Hamlet in a way,
that's true.
where
It's a
he's
lot
seeing
of
the
hanging
ghost and he's
out.
not
Yeah.
sure if it's real or not. And then he has to commit this murder. Instead of his uncle, it's of himself. But he doesn't want to do it or he's postponing it.
Yeah, maybe it's there's a bit of the inevitability of one's end or something as well, and David sort of because it's weird to bring up one thing I really like about this movie, and I don't think a lot of movies have it, is that it doesn't necessarily have a storytelling momentum or David's like motivations. He is just kind of hanging out and going through the plot. Because later when he becomes a werewolf, the next scene the day after is very comedic, and he's
Well, that's the
having
thing.
fun.
It goes back to like his earlier movies that just feel like a bunch of sketches thrown together into a loosely made film, but the jokes carry it.
It's very Kentucky Fried Movie in some of those parts. The
Yeah.
Zuckers thing, like some of those scenes, like the scenes later comedically, like when he wakes up zoo, those are very Kentucky Fried Movie. So I think you're very on point with that. So then we just do a cut, and after smiling, and the smile beforehand, Kelsey, and then they're just shower banging. I mean, it's on. And we get
Yeah.
Van Morrison. All the songs, as everyone knows, every song in this movie has "Moon" in the title, which should be pretentious, but it works really well. It's actually clever.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're just banging, and then he's laying in bed. So you got to think about it. This guy's had a pretty exciting few days. Backpacking with his best friend, who gets attacked by a werewolf.
He calls his parents like it's been a wild trip.
This has been a crazy adventure, guys. Um, then he wakes up in the bed. And then Jack is there, and we get the famous mirror shot where he shuts the mirror, and Jack straight
Yeah.
up looks like very similar to the Michael Jackson makeup in Thriller during the dance sequence. It's
Mhm.
pretty damn close. So then we get what I think is one of the best scenes of the movie, where they go in the living room and talk. I love the atmosphere of the scene. It does feel like when you're up late at night in a living room. I
Yeah.
love this is the meatloaf comment. He's like, "Hey, a nurse," and he starts explaining to him more that like you're gonna be a werewolf and you have to do something about this. You're gonna kill people. This is when it starts because every time he sees Jack, things start to get a little bit more because it's those tone
Yeah.
shifts. Like you're watching a comedy, then it's a werewolf attack, then you're at the hospital, and then there's funny scenes, then there's a sex scene. It's like watching a sex movie, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're in a different kind of movie again, and then it's like, hey dude, now it's serious. The tones keep shifting.
Yeah, and Jack ties the whole movie together really. These little discussions, like even think about it structurally, it's very meta where he's like, "Hey, you've got to do something about this. You're wasting time. You're just diddling around." Meanwhile, isn't that kind of what the movie's doing with the individual scenes? And then if he shows up to remind the movie what it is, or to remind the audience what the movie is. What always stood out to me about this second meeting, and it's such a little moment, but there was something I read today that vindicated how I've always felt about it. When he picks up the little Mickey Mouse, he's like, "Hi, David."
Yeah.
It was always such a little moment. It's like, why is that so? Why does that stand out to me so much? And last time I was watching it, it hit me. Oh, because it's a piece of Americana. It's identified the audience. But then I was listening today to something, and I just said reading earlier. That was just a lie. I was listening. I don't read. I don't even know how. And it was brought up that the porno theater sequence was supposed to be cartoons originally. And I thought, oh, so him picking up the Mickey Mouse almost could have been foreshadowing to later on with the what would have then have been a cartoon theater.
Is it weird to say? I think I didn't know that. I would probably prefer if it was I mean, I love, see
What's
you
tough
next
is they're
Wednesday, but
see you next Tuesday, I think it is, because it
yeah,
spells out cunt.
but
Or is it Wednesday? Maybe it's intentionally not cunt.
if it was if it was animated, I think I would like that sequence even
Yeah,
more.
no. What's tough is, yeah, in theory, I like it much more. Um, I wish we had done two versions, like a TV edit and then a theatrical edit or something. But I do love the See You Next Wednesday. This just as little pieces of sketch comedy. I know it's jumping ahead, but I think they're so funny and it adds so much to the movie. And I can't explain why. It might be my favorite jokes in the movie.
No,
It's just so
no, it
ridiculous.
by itself.
Yeah.
Because there's that behind the scenes thing too, where John Landis is setting and like the walls fall and it's just people
Yeah.
fucking, and he's like, what's going on? Um, and that also just goes into his goofiness, how much he was into like Looney Tunes and stuff like that, and that element that's in all of his movies. It's so strange that because he really doesn't do too much of it in here. There's just little things like that in this. Mostly, I think like an
Yeah.
homage. This is very much like I think paying tribute to Hammer and Universal horror films, but
Yeah.
modernizing it. I'm gonna do a modern version of the Wolfman. You know,
Right.
that's what, and I'm gonna have the modern special effects for that too, because we haven't gotten into it too much yet, but really the thing that this movie was famous for at the time, and what most people talk about, is the makeup and special effects by Rick Baker. Even though for me, as the years have gone on, that's not really what I love most about the movie or stay with the movie. But in like 1981, what made this a big deal was that was the thing that everybody talked about. This was the
Yeah.
first movie to ever win the Best Makeup Oscar. It was the first year they had the award. Rick
I mean,
Baker went on to win like 10 Oscars.
to this day, it's probably I can't think of even a contender for a best werewolf transformation aside from this.
No, it's definitely,
I would say this and then the original Wolfman are like
yeah.
the two, which is funny that I mean, even in terms of just quality in general, those are the two best werewolf movies easily, and nothing comes close.
So we're actually gonna go to what was honestly, I don't even know why. This is one of my absolute favorite stretches of the movie, is when Alex goes back to work and David just hangs out at the apartment. I don't know
It,
why this montage and everything is like perfect. I
for
think it's
me, the song, the use of Bad Moon Rising is a huge factor. And I also think that it perfectly captures the feeling of being bored, especially being bored in someone else's home. When like you're a teenager and you sleep over at someone else's house and they're not awake yet, so you're just kind of like putzing around, like opening the fridge, I'm still not hungry. And just flipping through the TV stations and all that. I don't know if I know of a better boredom movie scene really.
I agree, and I don't think many movies try to capture boredom. I think it's like it made me think
They try to do the opposite of capture
well,
boredom
like
typically.
that movie Jarhead, the Sam Mendes movie. I remember a lot of people liked the
Yeah.
movie. And I remember what I liked about that movie was they didn't have anything to do. It's just a
Yeah,
bunch of soldiers in the desert, and they're like the first Gulf War, and they're like, "What do we do? This isn't even a war. This is a joke." And they just
yeah.
start dealing with their own masculinity because they have nothing to do. Um, and I think
Yeah,
a
I
lot of
remember
movies don't
seeing that.
explore it. Uh, I agree with you. It's something about even the shirt he's wearing, the gray shirt, and the
Yeah, isn't it like
jeans.
NYC, I think it
Yeah,
says,
and him
which is
going
another funny
outside,
thing.
and he goes back in, and then they're not hungry, and then the
Mhm.
TV, and then the pacing, and then trying to read a book. I'm obsessed with the sequence. I don't know if it's the editing of it or the music choice. I think it's a combination of elements, but
Mhm.
it's a hard scene to analyze because it is just like a visual montage for like a couple minutes. But I
It's
definitely
great, and
one of the best scenes of the movie.
the transition's so brilliant too into the transformation where he's doing that. It's very funny. Once again, it's lulling you into this sense of comfort, just like the scene on the moors with all the banter does. And then all of a sudden, God, Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
It's just like blood
I'm
curdling
fucking
scream.
burning alive. Jesus Christ. No, it is the Jack thing again. There's like 3 moments in this movie when someone's like, "Fuck, shit, Jesus Christ, I'm burning alive." Yeah, it makes you comfortable because I think in between some of this, there's some exposition with Alex
Yeah,
and the doctor, but fuck those scenes. Um, and then yeah, when it comes back to him, because we get the full moon, and then I think what isn't Blue Moon's playing, and
yeah,
then we get the werewolf transformation scene. This is the most famous scene of the movie, without question. This is the
yeah,
most iconic scene of the movie. Um, Multiple reasons. I don't think we really need to go into because like people can look
yeah.
this up, and there's a million YouTube videos about
You
that
can
stuff.
listen to the guy who did the special effects describe the special effects to
Yeah,
you on this website.
that's the thing. It's like, what are you going to talk about? I've actually seen this
Yeah.
stuff in person too. I've been at places where they have the head that extends and
Hmm.
everything. So I've like, yeah, this is the iconic thing. I guess more, let's talk about, you could tell me, because the thing I like about this conversation is we're actually you've said things to me that I don't think we never had conversations about these specific things. I think usually when we hung out, we'd just be like, yeah, American Werewolf in London's great. And that was
Yeah,
about
I mean, it's
it.
hard to get into the detail. It's much harder to analyze a great work of art than it is like a silly piece of shit.
So some of the things we're talking about, we never talked about before, which I'm really enjoying. So I guess what do you would take from the werewolf scene interpretive? Like, what do you think it serves in the purpose of the movie, and what are there little details or things that you think might be worth pointing out that maybe isn't talked about all the time? Because people focus on the special effects of it so much that maybe they're ignoring other
Yeah,
elements.
so we're getting into the werewolf sequence as a whole now, right? Once Jack's on, or once David's on the prowl, not just the transformation.
I would have stay on the transformation for a second,
Okay,
then we can go into
yeah.
the werewolf attacks because I do think they're two
Well, I
separate
think
things.
yeah, I think it goes back into the Jewish thing. I think that the hair, it's funny, but it's intended to be. I mean, it's funny because it's like it's body horror. It really is like Cronenberg. Yeah, when the fingers turn,
Yeah.
it's got these weird like cartoon noises too of like stretching. And I'm not going to emulate them, but him getting hairier, and then I think of in this is just my interpretation of the movie that I think is built into it. I think that when his snout comes out, it's supposed to represent being insecure about having a Jewish large nose. Stereotypically, Jews are depicted with large noses. And I always wondered if the snout growing out, because the film is so much about Jewish insecurity, if that was a visual metaphor for that.
I love that. I love we went down that road.
And
Well,
that's said without any humor. I
no,
truly
yeah,
believe
it's
that.
not like it's like let's be anti-Semitic for comedy. Like, no, it's like I get what you're saying. Well, because I do think this is actually one of the deepest Jewish films ever made, which is odd to say. And I
Mhm.
didn't get that when I was younger. It was something that over the years I was like on
Honestly, what if it
rewatch.
was called A Jewish Werewolf in London?
Well,
It probably
that's
would be a more appropriate
well, that's
title.
kind of the key, right? What is an American as well? I think that's partially
Yeah.
part of it too. It's I'm assuming his parents were probably Jewish immigrants. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm just interpreting that most likely that he had Jewish immigrant parents that came over here. Um, so
And it's
he's like,
almost reconnecting with that
well, you got to
by
think
going on the
he
trip.
might be like a first generation American Jew in that family. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And he's the eldest of the kids. There's the younger kids that he calls
Yeah.
later. So it's the idea that it's like the Jew, leaving Europe where these atrocities happen, and then he's returning now as the first American born Jew in the family. And then as soon as he gets there, he's attacked. He's a
Yeah.
monster. So I don't think this is reading into it. I think this was written by I think this is why this film's lasted and had a good critical appraisal over the years, because I think if it was just special effects, it wouldn't have that. I think it was written by a 19-year-old, 20-year-old Jewish guy who was dealing with these. And John Landis, obviously a complicated figure.
Mhm.
as a person. I don't know if he's a good guy or not. I joke all the time about the Twilight Zone thing. In all seriousness, I don't know 100% the truth, but he's always come across in interviews as a very almost, I don't want to say a psychopath, but he's clearly,
I mean, he raised Max Landis.
well, that's the thing, Max. The whole Landis
I
thing is,
Is Max Landis the Frankenstein's monster, and John is the Frankenstein?
well, because God, when I was it's so you just want to like love John Landis, you want to because of the
Yeah.
body of work, but there is something about him that's off-putting as a person, and as a
Maybe
as a
you're just being
figure.
anti-Semitic.
That's what it is. Yeah, it was. That's all it was. Um, so this movie, his other movies, they don't really reflect that. They don't ever feel that personal. I don't feel, Trading
No.
Places. I think of Eddie Murphy or Coming to America and Animal
Yeah.
House. That's more
It's always weird
Harold
when you see his
Ramis.
name in these movies, even though you know he made them, when his name gets on screen for, like, Coming to America, it's like, "Oh, shit, yeah, he made this, I forgot
He
that."
made like the biggest black comedy of the '80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I always think of him almost kinda similar, actually, to David Naughton. I think about John Landis as a guy who made one movie. Even like Animal House, I've seen a few times this year. It's another 10 out of 10. Coming to America, I've watched recently. A good movie. It's not one of my favorites, but it's clearly a
it's
quality
it's one of
product.
the best commercial comedies of the '80s for sure, though.
Yeah.
Like a studio
Yeah, and it's
movie.
very well made.
Yeah, and it also
I think that's the
started
thing.
the
I just
trend of Eddie Murphy, the Nutty Professor
doing all the
thing.
characters,
Yeah,
the
and it's
sexual
and
chocolate.
it's and it's the early version of that too, and it's R-rated and stuff and I think Trading
Yeah.
Places is like an amazing
Oh
movie.
yeah.
So he did that he also made another movie, forget the one with Jeff Goldblum, Into the Night, I believe, is like the mid '80s. That people
Yeah, I
forget
don't know
about
that
that
one.
one. That's like you would like that movie. It's kind of like After Hours. It's like an up all night movie
Oh,
with Jeff
okay.
Goldblum.
He also
Uh,
made that movie where uh he crashed a helicopter, murdering 2 children and a man, allegedly.
It is weird with that the Twilight Zone thing because like him and Spielberg direct the two worst segments in it, and they're the two guys who like
Yeah.
really champion. I mean, don't get me wrong, his opening sequence is great. That's like
Yeah, that's what you want from the whole movie.
that's what you want an '80s Twilight Zone movie
Well,
to
it sucks
be.
because it's so hype, and
I
then it's just,
know.
like, the pacing just, the one yeah, the segment he did, which is fine, I don't hate it, but it's not what I want in the movie, and then Kick the Can is just a fucking just you take a nap,
It's
go to the
Spielberg. It's
bathroom.
my least favorite Spielberg thing out of any of his movies or anything he's ever done. I think Kick the Can is like I can't believe he made it. Is how I feel about it. Is that it's like the most schmaltzy bullshit. And then yeah,
Yeah.
then Joe Dante and George Miller come in and the movie kind of progressively gets better as they come
Right.
in, and then it kind of ends on a high. The last like 20 minutes
Yeah.
is awesome and you get a call back. But yeah, the opening is like you can't start at a 10 and then go to like a 5 and then a 3 and then like a
And
7
come
and
back
then
up like an 8.
yeah, and then end on an 8. It's like what the fuck? Because I always think in my head that movie could be like one of the absolute best films of the '80s by far. If
And it should have been.
yeah, because it's crazy. Because that should be. I mean, arguably that should be the greatest anthology film that was ever made. Should be that movie,
Yeah.
just because of the talent involved. I mean, it's crazy, and all those guys. I don't think it's wrong to think that like I would hold them equivalent to some of the directors and people that worked on Twilight Zone. I think George Miller and
Yeah.
Joe Dante and Spielberg and that are worthy of doing Twilight Zone. Um, because even the Joe Dante one, some of the special effects in that practical, I think, are some of the best I've ever seen with the
Yeah.
rabbit and stuff like that. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
W It took a genius like Jordan Peele to really achieve the true potential of the Twilight Zone IP.
But I don't know. I totally don't. I think there's something with this movie. One of my best friends is Jewish, and he hates Munich, and he hates like A Serious Man, and some of these Jewish films made by Jewish filmmakers, and he can't even explain to me what it is. And I do think there's an element to this movie that's kind of for us that we're never gonna totally get because we're not Jewish. That sort of explains a bit
Yeah.
of John Landis's psychology. And I find that fascinating about the movie too. That's why I kind of go back to it a lot and try to be, it.
Yeah, well, it gives it a richness, and maybe it's exoticism. I think a lot of white people have an issue with foreign religions. Like a lot of white Buddhists are this way, where they think it's deep because it's different. And I always think about the Wonder Years, the episode where Kevin goes over to the Pfeiffers, and they're having this rich like Jewish tradition, all that. And Kevin's talking to his family. They're like white trash. They don't really have culture. And I think that watching movies like this or Woody Allen movies gives you this secondhand feeling of that Jewish like elegance in their culture and how they handle things and like Catholicism in movies. Watching a Scorsese movie is better than going to any Catholic church, in my opinion, for that experience as a non-Catholic.
I agree. Okay, so let's go into the werewolf attack. So this is, I mean, pretty much from this point on, I think from the transformation, I don't think this movie has any. I think from this point the ball's rolling and we're going. Like this is a fucking
Yeah.
awesome movie from this point on. Every scene pretty much works for me. Um, okay, so we get the. I think it's basically we get like two big attacks, which is the couple going to have. They're waiting for people to come over for dinner. Um,
Hmm.
I like this scene, but I do. There's things that are just, it's like, come on, we'll give them a scare. We'll give them
Yeah.
a scare. Their performances,
I'm endeared to it, especially once they're ghosts. That's what I
yes,
really like is them in the
yes,
theater. I love the way, especially the girl, like once it's just so British in the way the comedy's done. It's so Monty Python in delivery.
but well, I don't want to jump too far into that because I want to spend some time
Yeah,
on that scene. But obviously, out of the werewolf attacks is the homeless guys. The big one's the station, the chase with
yes,
the. I'm assuming it's a steady cam. The chase through the tunnel into the
yeah,
escalator, and then you get the werewolf shot walking out, which is, yeah, I think you said it earlier, and I agree with you. I think that's the greatest uh moment of a werewolf in a movie because it
yeah.
genuinely feels like there's a werewolf walking out for real in that for like what, two
Yeah, I
seconds.
can't explain it. Something about it triggers this feeling in me whenever I watch it. Like you're in the woods and like you see a wild animal, even if it's a deer. There's just that moment when you're walking, like oh shit, and it's like this carnal kind of sense of like self-preservation. I get that when I see that scene. My brain still registers it like it's a real animal.
Well, also the guy in that scene, the most British guy
Oh, I
ever,
know.
is fucking hilarious. I mean, at first he's like, well, like, well, your bloody joke won't work, and then he like, I always think the part when he jumps over in the case and how physical that is when he goes,
Yeah, I
when he
think
kind
about
of
when he's
falls.
what I love is it's like he's degraded throughout the chase. He begins with he has a briefcase and the suit, and then he's running, and then yeah, he kind of trips over the turnstile, jumping over it. He spills his papers, and then by the time he gets the escalator, he's just throwing himself on all fours, just laying there, just completely denigrated.
Yeah,
And I think it humanizes him so well
he
without him getting
starts
lines
as
of
like
dialogue.
a stiff businessman who's kind of seems arrogant almost, and then
Yeah.
by the end he's just like a person who's just like completely freaked out and in this messed up situation. Um
Yeah, it's a great little exercise in characterization.
yeah, well that whole sequence is like one of the best directed scenes in the movie for sure, just from
Yeah,
a camera
easily.
work. Cuz the other scenes I like them, but they're more like, if you didn't have this sequence, I don't know if the werewolf attack stretch would really work as well because it would just be kind of these cutaways or this like build up.
Yeah.
But that sequence gives you kind of what you want. You want to see a fucking werewolf attack. But even
Yeah.
so, he does it so subtly. It isn't. I mean, he could have went a lot more gory with this, and at the time, you could have gotten away with it. A lot of movies were hardcore at the time, from the '70s and the '80s.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see a version of this directed by, someone else like an
Mhm.
Argento or
Well, I was just thinking, the scene of him getting chased in the tunnel is very, Sam Raimi. It's very
yeah,
Evil Dead with the camera demon.
yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, yeah. If you added the sound effect of the even the thing on it, well, even I don't know what it is. Him on that escalator and the way the camera gets close on him. I don't know who the cinematographer of this movie was. I should know that, but
Mhm.
that shot on his face and stuff like that, and then the way it does the transition. And the homeless scene always made me think of like a Clockwork Orange or something where they go beat up the hobos.
Yeah.
Uh, this like dystopia with homeless people.
Yeah, it's so funny. They're just living in trash world.
So, so he wakes up the next day. Isn't he by like a dead dog or something?
No, he's in the lion's cage.
Oh, that's right. He's in the lion's cage. I think it's actually an American Werewolf in Paris that has the dog scene. I guess.
Speaking of the zoo scene, this reminded, and I don't know if it was an homage, but another movie I'd say is very comparable to this is Cat People.
Hmm.
And it's not a werewolf movie, but I think it has all the same tropes as a werewolf movie, essentially, just using a jungle cat and it's a woman. And I think this movie always felt like an homage to how she would go to the zoo to be near the leopard. And the way it's shot just reminds me of that, showing the different zoo animals and then showing him in the, or no, I'm sorry, he's not in the lion's cage. That was a mistake. The lion's one of the cutaways. He was with the dogs.
Yeah, I thought he was
I'm
with the
pretty sure with the
dog.
wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so he's naked, and we go back to this
Yep.
Kentucky Fried Movie comedy sequence where like I remember I had a screening of this movie for people that had never seen it. I showed it in a college town. And when the movie was over and people were laughing during this, because this is the famous part where it's like, a naked man took my balloons. And he runs around. And when it was over, I asked everybody what they thought of it, and they were like, "Oh, it sucked." And I go, "What do you guys didn't like about it or anything?" And they were all like, "Oh, well, it was just I was laughing at it. All that stuff was so stupid and funny." I was like, "Oh, you mean the comedy scenes?" And then
Yeah.
I remember everybody
I
kind of
had that with
looked at
Drag
me.
Me to Hell.
Yeah,
A
you
lot of people like,
bitch,
"It's so
you
dumb." Yeah, they always
whore.
it's so dumb that the goat talks and stuff. I'm like, "But that's supposed to be dumb. It's funny."
That's what happened. Yeah, they were like, "Well, what about the scene where he's naked?" And all the boy was laughing. That was so stupid. I'm like, that's a comedy scene. That's one thing I would bring up because I think this is earlier, not during this stretch, but when him and Alex are like on that train or whatever, he's making the faces by the
Oh, yeah,
dog
the
people.
punk
He's like,
kids.
yeah, that's great. He steals a red coat. There's a part I think where he's just running and he grabs it.
Yeah, there's a lot of great shots, and, like, when he's talking and he's in the bush and he steps out of the
Oh
bush and he's talking to that
yeah.
little kid.
That could be like a comics panel, like almost like a Peanuts thing or
Exactly.
something. Like
But even him running in, like, the park bench, it could be, like, a long little strip at the
you're
bottom of a
right.
page,
Yeah, it is. It's like a comic panel
and then it's
thing.
got a shot of him standing in line with other people wearing just the dress and no shoes or anything, so his hairy legs are sticking out and the camera pans up to his face.
So Alex teams up back with them, and he's down to fuck. The wolf has come
Mhm.
out. I like this part too. He's becoming more of a beast. He's becoming more of his wolf side starting to come out, and he's like, I just feel amazing. He's like, come here, let's have a quickie before you gotta go. And
The thing is that it's kind of funny. We say it's unrealistic. He tells her that he loves her like what 2 days into knowing her, 3 days at this
I mean, I
point.
would tell her within
A
5
week.
minutes of meeting her.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna say like this is like 40, 50 minutes of the movie, and I love her.
I mean,
I know that I
we
do.
haven't talked about this enough. The hotness of the actress, the accent, her performance. I
Well,
think a
it's
really underrated performance too in this movie.
yeah, she's great. She's a kid in Walkabout. She's into all kinds of shit. She's just
Yeah,
like a that woman actress. But this is her at her absolute best. This is when she's given the proper role. It's the thing that's great about it is that sometimes an actress is so hot in a movie it ruins the movie because you can't focus on anything
Phoebe
else.
Cates in Fast Times at Richmond High. It
And that's
like,
another great example where she is that hot. She'll ruin your day. But the rest
yeah,
of the movie is good enough
yeah.
to keep pace with it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, because I won't lie. When I first saw this movie in the years as young, I mean, the number one thing, I was like, well, fuck these themes about Jewishness and all that crap. It was like, I'm in love with this woman. I mean, it was spank bank material. Not gonna deny it. It's what it was. It's like you want to watch porn. No, I got American Werewolf in London. Um, I mean, it might be part of the British nurse thing. I think that's an element to it as well. But she's just a waifu. I mean, everything about her.
Yeah.
It's just hard not to like fall in love with her.
She's
So
devoted to him.
it's one of those
She
points where
believes him.
casting makes the romance seem believable because I don't think in the writing this is a well written love story.
No.
and I don't think it makes any sense. But
I
but
wanna
the
talk about
but the
that real quick, though.
attractiveness of the actors makes it
That's you
gotta
can
work.
see them being into each other.
Yes.
But she kind of thinks she entertains his quote unquote fantasies throughout the movie of seeing Jack, of turning into where it's weird where she thinks he's crazy but kind of plays through it with him, but thinks it like maybe mental health awareness was that bad at that point. But I feel like
I wish
I
it was
feel
that
like
bad now. I'd love to go to
I
the
feel like
hospital and get
telling a
treated that
woman
way.
I turned into an animal last night and murdered 3 or 4 people is a red flag.
I don't know, chicks are into serial killers.
That's true.
I mean, that was a trend, but I mean, Ted Bundy got more poon than we did, you know?
It always went like, when you think when girls are, like, discussing body counts, they're not talking about people you slept with, it's
What's your body count? It's like about 12. Like, you've only killed 12 people? Were any of them children? No. No, you're not like that Landis guy. Uh, yeah, there's a sexual chemistry between the two of them on camera, which may have even been off camera, I don't know. They definitely have some kind of chemistry between the two of them as actors that
Yeah.
that does sell it a little bit more.
They're both attractive and they both have eyes.
Yeah, well, just God, she's just. I mean, I don't want to harp on it so much, but because I think she died.
Oh, that's horrible.
I don't know.
I hope
I
not.
almost don't want to look it up, but
I'm gonna look it up. It'd be even worse if she got fat.
well, that's what I meant. That's the
Oh,
same
yeah.
thing in my head as being dead to
No, she
me.
didn't.
She's alive?
She has 1 kid. Yeah, she's alive. She seems
Oh,
to age pretty well. Like, she's obviously older, but let me see. Yeah, she only has born. It doesn't have
I think
dead.
I might be mixing her up with the chick from Private Lessons and the Emmanuel movies. I think she died, and they look very similar. They're very similar
Mhm.
looking at because that movie too was one that I had boners for
Maybe
or
that
something.
lady was the Tulsa of this person.
Um, so we get the stretch then though where
Tulpa, not
David
Tulsa.
David gets in the car and the guy's talking about, it's like the Bob of Fleet Street, and and he's making a Sweetie Toad reference.
Yeah.
Then David realizes he is a werewolf. Jack is real. It's almost it kind of doesn't work narratively in this sense, and I don't mean this like that he intentionally did this, but let's say like Child's Play, right? Like there's a better version of that
Mhm.
where you don't know if Chucky's real or not, or if Andy's killing, or like I just had another one, Candyman, right? I think does it pretty well when you find out Candyman's real.
Oh, yeah,
So
it takes a long time in Candyman.
so if you're looking at it that way, this is the moment, although we know as the audience it's real, but so you have to look from David's point of view. This is the moment that he realizes he is a werewolf. He's like, I'm a fucking werewolf. And he starts like insulting the Queen and Prince Charles, and he basically runs off from Alex. Um, this is where we get a extremely
Well,
powerful scene that I think say your point. I'm sorry, go ahead.
it is a funny joke about I don't know free speech laws over there, but I'm pretty sure they don't have them, or they don't have free speech like we do. So that's funny that he's trying to get arrested by saying offensive things, but also he's asking to be arrested and they won't arrest him.
No, they're so British about it. He's like, just get out of here. And he's like, I'm gonna kill all these people. I'm a jihadist. Just go. Come on. Not this
Yeah.
nonsense. He's like, I'll kill you and your family. Come on now, go on. He's just the most patient cop ever. We get this beautiful sequence that I think it stayed with me so much all these years. Where David goes to call his parents, who we haven't seen except for the dream sequence.
Yeah,
And
and that is a nice moment that the dream sequence actually gives you a visual when he calls him later, so you know the structure of his family. It's
yeah,
really subtle how it plants that seed.
and now what his house looks like. You know what the sister
Exactly.
looks like too. The kids are named Max and Rachel. Those are John Landis's children's names. So he says on the phone, tell Max and mom and dad. So he talks to his sister. The way the dialogue for the little sister is so realistic. Uh, the
Yeah.
stuff and the part where he
And while
just
he's on the phone, he has a razor blade to his wrist,
that's the part.
contextually. He's
Yes,
saying goodbye because he's gonna try to kill himself.
yes, that's the part. I think he has like a Swiss Army knife.
Oh, it could be.
Because I think the knife's not cutting through the skin, and that's why it's not working, if I remember correctly. Because if he had a razor blade, it would have cut through the skin. Because I always thought that was weird. He's there,
Oh,
like,
okay.
trying to slit his wrist.
I always thought he just kind of like, I don't want to say pussied out, but didn't go through with it.
I
I guess would
thought
be a
that
better way
too.
of
I'm
phrasing
not
it.
sure what it is. I don't know if it's that it didn't go through the skin or that, because you probably couldn't slit your wrist with like one of those flat knives on a Swiss Army knife. That'd be really hard. It
Yeah,
just
I don't
it
know.
wouldn't be sharp enough. But I also think you kind of
I'm
chicken
not
out.
gonna test it.
But yeah,
It'd be fun if I test it on here, just like a science experiment.
Royal Tenenbaums. You're like, I think it's working.
Next thing I know, I'm getting carted in the hospital, a needle in the haze playing.
Well, you're just over there and you're like dying, and I'm like, anyway, our next scene.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already. I think there is something in the scene about the disconnect of home and place. Obviously, him calling back to America, him calling
Well,
back to this
even
place of familiar.
him calling his sister and her being young and not quite, you know, registering what he's saying to her. And I forget what he says or something like, "No, I'm not joking," or something like
Yeah.
that. Like, "Tell Max I mean it. I love him. I mean it." And she's clearly being kind of silly about it or not quite understanding it. That I think makes it even more tragic that he can't even get his final message across properly.
Yeah, and he's just like, I love you too, you little jerk.
Yeah, it's very sweet, but it's also sad at the same time.
So here's a question. Does she tell the parents and Max this, or does she not deliver it well?
I think so.
She tells the
I think
parents that you
maybe
know,
not like verbatim,
right.
but probably like you gotta think like if you're a little kid and you get a call from your older brother like that, it's probably a big deal. They hadn't heard from him a while. She knew he was in the hospital, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that she relayed the
You
message.
think the parents would come to? You think they would hear that the kid's in the hospital and they would go out to Europe? I don't know. I didn't think about that.
Plane tickets were expensive.
Not back then. It was very cheap to go to Europe in the 80s. In our time, everything's expensive. But back then, everyone I meet is older. Like, oh, I went to Germany in 1987, or I went to Paris. I'm like, well, that sounds nice.
Yeah, I've heard those stories. It's funny. I'm so bad that like when I see people around in like movies walking around without masks and stuff for a while, I was like, what the hell? There's a good 2 years I had to reprogram my mind and not expect people to wear masks in movies.
So we're going a bit on time. Let's just jump into it.
Yeah.
I think this is the best scene of the movie, is the theater sequence. I think by far.
Yeah.
I think it best sells the premise of this movie. Not in the sense it's about a guy becoming a werewolf, but I think the most interesting idea of this movie by far, and the most ambitious thing that I don't think any horror movie's done as well, or any comedy's done this as well, is it starts with Jack, but dead people still being alive as ghosts, and they fucking with you. They're mad at you. You're a monster.
Yeah.
You killed them. They're bitter, and the different personalities. Because for a while it's just Jack, and that plays into it. But the genius in the screenplay, and in what Landis does here, and it's the highlight of the movie for sure. Every time you watch it, is to say, okay, I'm gonna have them go around and kill all these people, and then I'm gonna bring everybody together. There's a porno theater, so there's part of kind of the artifice of film and stuff like that.
I also think it plays the sexuality is such a big factor, like becoming a man, being an animal. So then the porno playing there, I don't think it's gratuitous. I think it adds another layer.
100% agree, and that the porno's absurd.
Yeah.
And that they're all there just fucking gory as shit. Jack is pretty much a skeleton. You know, at this point, it's like an animatronic almost.
Yeah, I
It's
heard
not-
today that I almost said Orson Welles. Griffin Dune was actually doing the puppetry and moving the mouth
Yeah.
as he talked in that scene, which is really cool.
So he basically tells him like, well, this is why I think it's the thing that best sells the movie, and the premise is like the conversation where they all debate how he could kill himself is the mix of the comedy and then the horror, and it's like those two things are at one in this sequence because it's a funny scene, but they're
Exactly.
talking about a very dark subject. How do you kill yourself? How do you die? And it's like a drowning. You could put a gun in your mouth and pull the trigger. And the couple's
takes
really
me back to,
friendly,
like
you know, but then other people hate.
Yeah, to me, it really feels, to go back to it with the Jewish thing, just like a Woody Allen scene. Like the beginning of Annie Hall, or especially Crimes and Misdemeanors, when he goes to his childhood home and sees his family debating. Those two scenes to me always really reminded me of each other.
I think that's a good, well, almost that vaudeville sort of thing Woody does in his movies, these weird vaudeville fantasy
Exactly.
sequences. It also is kind of upsetting you just because, like, oh, John Landis maybe could have done movies like that. He could have
Exactly.
extended this a little bit further, because really the Twilight Zone thing hurt his career so bad, and then, Coming to America was kind of a favor from Eddie Murphy, and then
Yeah.
Beverly Hills Cop 3 and all that. But at this movie, it's like, oh, there's a shade of a more complex filmmaker, because this is really a complex sequence.
Yeah,
Just
there's a lot going on, and it's all very substantial. The special effects, the jokes, the thematics of it.
my favorite shot and moment in this entire movie. And I want to hear what yours is after I say mine real quick. But I think it's the
Mm.
moment the guy from the station points and he's like, "You must die, David Kessler." I think is the best. Like, just shivers go up my spine and everything like that. But it's also funny. Because I love the name David Kessler. And,
Yeah,
and
and the
I
way it's pronounced with that
I
accent.
feel like if I was reading this script, I think a good movie you could be flipping through, like the movie Her. I think if I read that script, I'd be flipping through and going, man, this works. I like the conversations you're having. I think if I got to
Yeah.
"You must die," David Kessler points at him, I
Well,
think it would impact me.
I saw a video of, I think he's the world's fastest or one of the fastest speed readers, and he's asking how he does it and process the information. And he said that, when he's reading a scene where it's like a field and a horse is, going through the field, running through, he actually tries to see it through the text. He tries to hear the horse's hooves and all that, which I never understood. I'm not a visual reader,
Mhm.
but I think that I tried practicing that for a while and I could see it and I was reading faster. And I think similar, when you're reading a script, you can picture the movie in your head. I used to do that, read a script before I watch a movie. And similarly, some good movies, you can see the script behind the movie when you really stop and think about it.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. What do you have any comments on the scene and the interactions and stuff like that? Because I'm just giving like compliments without breaking down analysis. I guess the thing I do take away is that I mean I can't think of a better word than macabre, but it's them looking
Yeah.
so bloody and it's disturbing, but the fact that it's not gross because it's got that comedic tone is really, like, I think the genius of this whole movie, what it does, and this scene is like the
Yeah.
perfect,
It's
mix
the
of all those things.
culmination of all the themes and ingredients of the movie in one scene. You get the sexuality, the gallows humor, the
Hmm.
special effects, the humanity of the whole thing, and how it's kind of a college comedy at points. And it's all just coming together for this one final. Really, it's the final scene of like real dialogue and interaction
Yeah.
too.
Well, I think
Actually, I've always gotten a Taxi Driver vibe from this scene. I've
mhm.
actually felt it's very Scorsese,
I
going back to
agree.
After Hours.
I agree, and I don't think it's a coincidence they both did Michael Jackson videos in the 80s. I think there was a certain kind of style or certain type of person Michael
Yeah.
Jackson was appealed to at the time like that. Um, the thing that shocked me when I saw this movie at the first time, and it's still probably, it's like it's not an issue. And I've grown to not have an issue with it with time, and I do think it kind of all ends on a punchline. This movie, Roger Ebert gave it like 2 stars, and in his review, he said that the movie feels oddly unfinished, like there's scenes missing. Um,
Mhm.
the movie has this rushed romance. It has these rushed character things. The thing that always bothered me about the abrupt ending, because I don't mind it having that, but this is
Yeah.
the point when the movie's getting so interesting, and you start to
Yeah.
care about David so much. I mean, when I first saw this, it was like I was so invested in everything happening. I was loving the scene so much, and then it, like, cuts away, and then when it comes back, he's holding the chair, and you just never have another scene with David or any I mean, there's, like,
No.
no I mean, he doesn't even get, like, a big line before that, they're just having the conversation, um,
And he just starts transforming.
and that's it.
You see the nails grow.
And he's gone from that point, and, and that
Yeah. Which
that's never even it's effective, but it's always just fucking bothered me because it's like, and it might have been budget, it might have been when he wrote it. I don't know. There's a million ways to interpret it, but it just feels like if we could have just got like another 10 minutes a little bit before we go into the final. Because I did not know when I first saw this movie, this was the fucking ending. I thought he was going to turn into a werewolf. There was going to be more. I
Yeah.
didn't know the
You feel
movie
like
was
there's like
going
an
to.
hour left.
Yeah, it feels like you're entering like a second act ending going
Mhm.
into a third act or something. And I mean, there's like 5 minutes left after this. I mean, it's quick. I mean,
Yeah, which I do think
it turns into the Blues Brothers again too. There's a fucking car wrecks and
I was
everything.
gonna say, it is funny. There might be more people that die as a result of traffic accidents in this movie than a werewolf, which last time I saw the movie, I was laughing so hard at the Piccadilly
Oh,
Square,
it's insane.
scene, but, I think it adds to the tragedy. I like the fact that it feels, abrupt, and I think, like, when big public events happen like that, it is very quick.
Mhm.
Um, I do like even, when Jack gets killed earlier on, it feels very abrupt.
That's
You know,
true.
he doesn't get a final line. I forget what he's just reaching his hand down to get David, and then he just gets attacked out of nowhere. And I think he has a silly line before, and then he's just screaming obscenities as he's being murdered. Um, so I think it's in line with this movie's depiction of death that it just comes abruptly and uncaringly. But it definitely takes you back. And like I said, when we finished the movie, the thing my mom said was, she said, "I didn't like how that ended."
Well, it's almost not an ending. The movie really doesn't have an ending in a sense. I mean, it does, but like
Yeah.
I think in a classic sense, it does just kind of wrap up without any kind of like storytelling uh conclusion. I mean, well, but my issue, like I said, I just think at that point the movie's getting that's like when it's at its most interesting, and I just wanted to keep
Yeah.
going in that direction. Like, oh, now these dead people are all gonna follow him and bother him. And I think you could have done more with that in a 2-hour film,
Mhm.
as opposed to, this movie's only 97 minutes. That's one reason I think it's so rewatchable, and
Yeah.
it's a very quick watch. Like, once you kinda get over the hump of kind of the hospital stuff and a couple other things, you're pretty much that
Yeah.
last, like, stretch. Once he starts becoming a werewolf, I mean, the movie really just flows into the ending. I mean, it feels like 20 minutes.
What I said to my mom when we finished the movie is, and I know this isn't getting in your complaint so much, but I asked, like, "Well, how else does the movie end than him just getting killed?" Because some werewolf movies will say, "Oh, if you use wolf's bane or if you do this ritual or whatever, you might be able to turn back." Or there's a sliver of hope that usually ends in the werewolf getting killed anyways, but there's some MacGuffin to
Mhm.
get them out. But David doesn't have a chance. It's just hopeless. It's just him gradually accepting that he has to die. And I think that's pretty rare in a werewolf movie. I can't think of another one off the top of my head that's just like, "Oh, you got bit by this werewolf, you just have to die, or else other people
Well,
will."
also you bring up the cowardice earlier, the knife thing. I mean, they're all in the theater and they tell him to kill himself. So like he has to know he's going to transform into a werewolf that night. So he doesn't make the decision to kill himself. I mean, that's what's so weird about it. It cuts
Mhm.
away and it comes back. So we don't even really know how the conversation ends with the dead
Yeah.
people. Um, so David, I mean, a lot of this, the last 20 minutes is things would be prevented if he had just killed himself. And he
Yeah.
refuses to, which I think is really interesting. Because because it's an interesting question yourself. Let's say you put yourself in this situation, knowing you're going to kill people, and not only you're
Yeah.
going to kill them, they're going to be undead after you do so. Do you think that would give you enough initiative to then kill yourself?
You think I need that to kill myself?
I thought you were gonna fucking say that. You're
Yeah.
like, I've been looking for an
That's the
excuse for
joke.
fucking
Yeah.
29 years. No, but seriously,
I just need to get a good day off work to do it.
it is an
Huh.
existential thing at the
Yeah,
center
no,
of
it
this
is.
movie that's
It's a
really not.
conundrum.
Yeah, like, because I would be sitting there going, well, I don't want to kill people as a werewolf, but I do like
Well,
being
it's
alive and
also
banging that British nurse.
it's also that, like, coming of age angstiness is, "What if I'm a bad person? What if I hurt people through my actions?" Going back to sexuality, what if I'm hurting people by indulging in my, sexual fantasies with them? And then they're walking around damaged because of what I've done to them, should I just kill myself? I think it is dipping into those themes of like teenage suicidality, or a bit older than teenage in this case. But I feel like this movie's, it feels like David's going through teenage stuff. I feel like he's a metaphor for a teenager. He's just aged up to do the things the movie needs him to do. But I've always felt the film spoke more to teenagers than it did young men.
I agree. I think for me, I would probably kill myself in this situation. I wouldn't want to. I know this is like a huge hypothetical. If I was a werewolf, uh, but I think as soon as I found out that that was the truth, or at least I mean, because there would always be that deniability in your head, like, is this real? Um,
Yeah.
but the moment that it becomes real, I think, that you find out that all the people got murdered,
How do you live with yourself?
I probably would just kill myself. Yeah, just out of like the despair of it and everything like that. Because like, yeah, what's the point of living if you're gonna? Because I'd rather kill myself than kill people. You know. Um,
Yeah.
but I sometimes never think about it. That is a huge thing in this movie. There is this kind of unanswered thing about it, about David's sort of refusal of his own sacrifice for himself for the betterment of. I'm not saying that makes him
Yeah.
selfish or anything or a bad person.
Well, that's what makes it kind of complex, is that it's like, well, he does have to literally kill himself to achieve his goal. So you understand why he might be hesitant.
Yeah, it's
Like
not.
I said, it's very Hamlet.
Yeah,
I really am starting to see David as this kind of Hamlet figure where he's just caught in uncertainty. But I like that you don't see the. I mean, I'd love to see the transformation, but I love the distance at the end of the
yeah.
movie,
Mhm.
where once he's the wolf again. I mean, you already got the best werewolf transformation scene. You get a hint at it with the nails growing, but then he's just the wolf, and it's vicious, and you're disconnected from him. And I do think there's intent with that,
Mhm.
because he's so far gone, and it's almost telling you he's not coming back. David's gone. And then at the end, so for the final moment when Alex is trying to talk to him, you've been separated from him so abruptly and so jarringly, just like she has, that you're wondering, like, is he in there at all? And you have that moment of kind of naive hope before the ultimate ending. But I
Plus,
do wonder if it's all setting up that final question at the very end of the movie.
well, the eyes too for a second sort of hesitate at the
Yeah.
end. I agree with you. I do think because you're basically following this guy the whole movie. I mean, that's the thing. You're with him as he turns into a werewolf. You're looking at him voyeuristically while it's happening. The people who get
Yeah.
attacked by the werewolf, you're not really. You're the point of view of the werewolf for a lot of these scenes. The dream sequences, there's point of view shots when he's hunting. There's a point of view shot when he's killing the people as the werewolf. You're going on this journey with him, and then this is really the first point um narratively in a big way that we're not with him, we're the cops, we're the people out in the street, he's inside, he's a
Yeah.
monster, he's not David anymore. um and you no longer feel this connection and empathy with him that you do through the rest of the movie. This is when it actually is scary, like the werewolf in this stretch. Because the thing I find so amazing about this that I also think a lot of movies wouldn't do, and the fact he did this at the time is, you know, it's a lot of like the werewolf attacks people kind of in private locations, but the fact he has the werewolf just coming out in public around like thousands of people, and I know it's like the wheelbarrow and they're running through, but there's some
Yeah.
of those shots. I mean, it's what you want. You're like, holy crap! It's like when the T-Rex goes into the city in the Lost World. There's like that 5 minutes. You're like, well, this is pretty cool. It's kind of King Kong-ish too, I guess.
It
There's a little
makes it
bit of
feel
that.
real.
Yeah,
'Cause it feels lived in. It's a familiar setting, it's busy, and also it makes you think, "Oh, this could happen in broad daylight. I could be driving my car to work, and this could happen."
yeah, a werewolf.
I think that a lot. When I'm just going to get
You remember
groceries,
that
I worry.
Wes Craven movie Cursed with Jesse
I think
Eisenberg?
about that a lot.
Yeah, and like they're in the car and they get attacked by the werewolf. They get bit by the
'Cause it's
werewolf.
got that damn, like, thing where it's the production hell, and they filmed a movie with a different cast, and allegedly there's a different cut available, and I'm sure it's only, like, half the movie. And so, I don't know, I think about it.
Yeah, because I remember there's things about that movie I did like, actually, like
I
visually and
just saw
stuff.
it.
but it's a
I
weird
saw it way
movie.
too young. Yeah, like, remember I
That
said last episode about when you're young, you just like anything that's, like,
that's what it
entertaining?
was, yeah.
That was one of those movies
That's
for
what
me
we
where I
should go
saw 100
re-explore together.
times.
We should, like, just watch
That'd
Cursed
be
one night
fun.
and see, like we're like, "Wait, Cursed is Kino?"
That'd be so
Um,
funny.
yeah, we love it. But, yeah, him attacking the just the city, him being out there, the cops there's a shot of the cops in the car with the guns, it's like an action movie shot.
Yeah.
Um, and then, the doctor's trying to get there and Alex is running. It's kind of cutting between like 4 or 5 different things at the same
No,
time.
the editing's intense for that whole sequence, showing the
Amazing
different
editing.
cars, showing the guy go through the window, the guy in the motorcycle getting smushed, all that.
So we come down to the alleyway, whether it's underdeveloped or not, or what doesn't work, emotionally, this is where we're at.
Mhm.
Alex is walking down the alleyway. I love you, David. The eyes hesitate for a second. Then the wolf attacks her. And then they shoot, and then we get the naked David, and the movie ends kind of on a punchline. I mean, it's a crazy moment. I mean, it's a shot of him naked, and then
Yeah.
bomb did a bomb, a bomb, a bomb, bomb. Um, we're talking about these Jewish themes and what we think a lot of this movie means, on the conscious and the subconscious level. What do you think with this ending connecting to that? Him, the hesitation, and then getting shot by them. What do you think that?
I don't think about it in a Jewish sense
Hmm.
at that moment. I think that I just read more as being about his transformation and showing that there was a moment where David might have started to come through, but ultimately the wolf was just too strong and he couldn't. I guess it's more about just inner human or not inner humanity, but um or
There's a moment that
human
he's
desires.
gonna go Gentile, and then he changes his mind. He
Yeah,
accepts Jesus for a second, and then they shoot him.
I think it's just about like how we're slaves to our own whims.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the ending takes on more of a broader scope and sort of loses some of the Jewish themes, or maybe I'm just not
Yeah.
seeing it. There could be something there I'm not seeing. Um, I don't know. It's a powerful ending though. The image is very powerful because it is just he's
Yeah.
just fucking dead. There's really no
Yeah.
lingering on it. It's just a dead
What's so
body.
cruel, the joke with the end credits in the song
No,
is insane.
no, it's insane that it's a. I mean, I guess it's a comedy and it's heart in a lot of ways, but the fact it does end on like a punchline is
Yeah, it feels like a cruel joke.
um yeah. So a few things just to go over real quick. Obviously the biggest thing to come out of this movie, unfortunately, I mean not unfortunately, fortunately, but overshadows it is John Landis gets the job on Thriller. Rick Baker does that. That's
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. That's so famous, and it's weird to think, like, I hate to say it, I think probably the most important and famous thing about this movie is the Thriller thing. It's not actually the movie itself, it's the fact that this aesthetic that they developed and the team that worked on this led to that phenomenon that was Thriller, biggest video of all time. I think I mean, I Thriller's like a 10 out of 10 for me, and I think it's because it's a lot of like this American Werewolf and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny because John Landis really only does this these 2 times, and I'm like, man, fuck. Even in this, it's perfect. It's almost like a Thriller. He takes it to some new highs because he has so
Yeah.
much money to do it, and you get a Michael Jackson dance sequence. Um, so that's just got to be noted. I think that has kind of kept this movie relevant and thought of because it's associated with that so much. It's got that video has a lot of the same special effects and makeup and stuff like that. Um, Griffin Dunn went on to be a pretty semi-successful character actor. He's in a movie we both love
Yeah.
from the '80s, After Hours, Scorsese.
Yeah, he
Uh,
wasn't done after this movie.
but didn't really have a big career. He's in movies like like My Girl. He's like
He's a that guy.
he is a that guy. Um,
Which is weird that After Hours become a meme lately
yeah.
with the scene with the girl talking about her husband when he would like what he would yell when he climaxed has become a meme where you insert different things into what he would say as he climaxes.
Some things I read. just about the making and behind the scenes stuff, like stuff we talked about earlier, and so on and so forth. But I from what I could tell, it seems like David Naughton had a pretty rough time on this movie physically. Just like even the transformation scene, he was
Yeah.
like in that hole in the floor for like days. They were in the freezing weather at the one point. He actually, ran around naked in several scenes and stuff like that. It's a pretty committed
Yeah, I heard he got
performance.
frostbite on his penis.
Um, the soundtrack, the songs, all of Moon and Title. Griffin Dunn and David Naughton said on the commentary they don't know why Landis didn't use Werewolves of London in this movie. And it's weird we keep bringing up the Scorsese connection. That song is used in The Color of Money in the Tom Cruise sequence when he's going around the pool table. So there are these weird
Yeah.
crossover things. Like,
Well, the
why is
whole
that song
like
playing in a bar at a pool hall like Werewolves in London, but it's not in American
I
Werewolf in
think
London?
this Scorsese connection is, yeah, I mean, obviously done, but also just the filthy porno theater. It had this 70s grime type thing to it. And I think this movie at points does feel grimy, particularly in that porno theater sequence.
Well, it's almost like if David, like if it was just if he had just been an incel, we'd be right there.
Yeah,
But he's not, so it doesn't fall into that category. But like, I think if he was that way, it would probably feel more in line with those movies. I think it would go more in it.
right.
I think it's just kind of missing. I'm not saying missing. I don't think that would make the movie better or anything, but it feels like it's on the edge of that because it is about like
I just,
men and what they
I
deal
feel like
with.
David Kessler is me, but he's not literally me.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not a literally me character. That's exactly right. He's not quite at Patrick Bateman or the driver levels, but he's like the guy you are before you become literally me in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Because I think in some ways that guy he dies in the movie, but he dies representatively in you as well, and then you become the literally me
that's what
guy.
the movie's really about,
Yeah,
is just losing hope as a young man and just accepting.
yeah, accepting it, and then driving around listening to Kaminsky as a werewolf. It's
Yeah,
Gosling in the jacket, but he's got like the Michael
that'd be
Jackson.
cool.
Oh,
That'd
dude,
be.
if Drive was a werewolf movie, holy shit,
I'm kind of
Refn's.
shocked Refn hasn't made a werewolf movie yet. I feel like he should.
Well, Gosling at one point too, he was announced to be the
He was
Wolfman.
gonna be
Yeah,
Wolfman.
the Lee Winnell, and I think he's actually. It totally makes sense. Gosling as the
Yeah,
Wolfman. It's like, of course, but only if he's driving around listening to
yeah,
Nightcall and
with the jacket.
I even think that song starts the coin in the jukebox and there's a wolf howl.
I think there is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a woo. That's the opening of the song.
I'm gonna laugh if there isn't. We just made that up and
That's how every
agreed.
song starts in my head. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We could go into more trivia, talk about that. I think we have so well.
Yeah.
What do you have to say? I mean, I somehow feel like we said a lot of good things, but I also feel like I didn't say enough. I don't know. I feel like I missed it because I love this movie so much. I made
Yeah.
a video about this movie like 3 years ago that I put a lot of work into. I can't emphasize enough like how this is one of my favorite movies and how much I love it and how like addicted to it I am. Or it's like I'll put it this way, it's a movie I wish I would have. A lot of movies I don't have that where it's like I don't think I wish I had made The Seventh Seal or like you know what I mean? There's some movies where I'm
No,
like
I'd be embarrassed if I made that.
well no, just like
I know what you
I
mean.
have no connection to this, in that
Yeah,
sense.
you
It's
just
like
admire it.
but this is the kind of movie like this is the kind of movie I would like to make if I made a movie. I'd be proud of this is like in my head whatever I'm trying to do. I've even ripped things off from this movie, the first horror movie I made when I was like 20. I played a character that comes back from the dead to communicate with people and he's like bloody and that's from this movie. Um
Mhm.
in particular, I'm just so obsessed with the Jack. I'd say three things. It's Jack and David's relationship, how hot Alex is, and the locations and atmosphere of this movie. I
What
put that.
about the werewolf?
Well, it's weird. I put that all above it, above
Oh,
the special effects and the werewolf. I think that stuff is, as I've seen it more, is the stuff that's less for me. and more it's just the tone. And I think I would enjoy this movie if it didn't have a werewolf in it. That's just like the awesomeness on
That
the
is
top,
true. Well,
you
that
know.
is a big thing that I was gonna say for my final opinion is I think that it's a deeply human film. And I think that's overlooked a lot of the time in favor of the superficial elements of it.
Yeah, the special effects. That's what most people you talk to would be the trans. And you're right. I mean, that's the thing. We were buddies. We both loved werewolf stuff more than vampire stuff and like all these other genres.
Yeah.
Because I think werewolves, and sadly, only a few movies have done this. I don't want to get this. Ginger Snaps is a perfect example. You can so easily tie a theme with the transformation of a werewolf. Ginger becoming a woman, being gross like a monster, uh
Yeah.
is and then this thing with the Jewish element or being out of your element. There's
What's really being a werewolf is really kind of a symbol of being an outsider. Like even in the Wolfman, they were the gypsies, and that's where the first attack occurs at Gypsy Village. And so I wonder if we connected because, like, we're talking about Scorsese and the incel thing as jokes, but the werewolf connection is maybe that it is an allegory for being an outsider more than anything.
I think that's a great place to end. I think that's beautiful. Um all right, well, for any of the outsiders out there and not like the Francis Ford Coppola movie or book, we're not Pony Boy, Wolf Boy. Stay
I came
golden,
up with a
stay golden, Wolf Boy.
I came up with a closing line as well for this episode.
Go ahead, what's up?
Wait, it was supposed to be an opening thing, so I have to like yeah, I'm just gonna do the hello anyways. Hello, we're the Cinema Chads. We fuck Stacy, so you don't get to. Is what I would say at the beginning of this.
Okay, so we have episode 4 coming out. We're going to talk about Phantasm, which is a movie that we both are big fans of, and that one I think has a lot of thematic stuff to break down that I'm really excited about. Um, the theme was Halloween. This is definitely a Halloween movie. I always watch this around October. Like I said, I may have brought up we're trying to get some guests on. I won't say who, but some people have gotten in contact with me on Twitter, and I'm trying to plan things with them. So when we get done with this Halloween run, we're probably going to transition into an episode where we'll have someone who is a semi-successful YouTuber, but they will be on here with us, and then we will kind of start rotating guests in. But the majority of the podcast will still just be us. We're not going to be doing that every week where it's like an interview show. I still want to focus on the two of us talking about movies that we really like. But um, we had a lot of technical difficulties doing this episode. We had about an hour where
Yeah.
we couldn't get our shit to work. We had a very stressful day. There was a lot of ups and downs, but we got through
I
it.
don't know if you could tell by seeing the background, but tornadoes hit both of our houses
It
while we
looks
were
like we're in
filming.
the same room on opposite sides.
Well, don't give it away.
It looks like you're over here and I'm by the Warriors poster, and we're because last time I had like the lights and it
It's
looked like a
fine.
different place, but it literally looks like it's just that generic
You're
white
just in a more
walls.
sepia version of my room.
And that's literally just like I just switch the light over, you know.
Yeah, let me do mine.
Yeah, you're just in the dark.
There,
There you
now
go.
I'm bright.
Okay. You're not that bright.
No.
All right, hey man, thank you for doing this one with me again. We got through it. I
Yep.
appreciate it. Everybody, please subscribe. Please donate on the donation button there. Give us money. Particularly if you know you're a fan of incels and Jewish stuff. That's our bread and butter. And thank you for watching.